Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this meeting of the Preservation Board to establish who is here in this virtual setting. I'll call a roll. I am present. Commissioner Bachman, are you here?
I'm here.
Commissioner Hamilton, are you here? Good job, Dan. Where's Tiffany?
He was here
She was in the meeting.
30 seconds ago.
Tiffany, unmute if you're here. Commissioner Killeen, are you here?
Here.
Commissioner Richardson, are you here? Commissioner Robinson, are you here? Commissioner Vines, are you here?
Here.
Alderman Coder, are you here?
Here.
Okay, there are 5 commissioners present, possibly 6, but we haven't heard from Tiffany. But with 5 commissioners, we have a quorum and we can begin. Commissioners, has anybody read the June 2020 minutes? And if so, do you have a motion regarding them?
Yes, I've read them. I move that we approve the minutes of the last meeting. The preservation.
I didn't hear you.
The motion has been made. Who seconded it?
I'll second it.
Okay, and here's Commissioner Coder present also. That's good. Nice. Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, those will be our minutes. Commissioners, look through the agenda and tell me if any of you need to recuse yourselves from any item being presented today. If so, speak up now. Okay, I hear no one recusing themselves. Commissioners, looking through the agenda, is this the order in which we want to discuss things? Hearing no changes, I presume that will be it, and this will be our agenda. Let's begin the meeting with an interesting presentation on 10 North Tucker. Staff first.
All right. This is, let me, oh, okay. Getting my pyrotechnics down. This is a preliminary review at 10 North Tucker Boulevard in downtown St. Louis. I think a lot of folks will recognize this. This is the east side of the Civil Courts building at 11th and Tucker. And this is the site of a very exciting proposal in an age where we have a lot of conversations about taking down monuments and sculptures to be building one up to honor some very special people in the history of the United States and in the history of St. Louis. Here is a image of the, sorry, someone came into the meeting. Here's an image of the location of the proposed sculpture. And here is the front view of the sculpture. The sculpture is meant to commemorate the hundreds of lawsuits that took place to achieve freedom for enslaved people in St. Louis courts before the Civil War took place. The Dred Scott case, I guess, is the most famous of those cases, but there were actually many, many of them. And the 22nd Judicial Court is seeking to create a monument to those enslaved people and their legal representatives who helped them in the court process. So the front of this is a courtroom scene with a witness and an attorney pleading his case. Up at the top, you see something I think is very exciting about the design of this, which is the architectural kind of features to it of that interior dome structure. Then here's the back view of it with images that are reflective of the history of St. Louis as well. Here's another picture of the site plan provided by the applicant, showing the exact location and the kind of plaza space that's proposed. And I thought I had some more slides, but they are not here. But that gives you an idea of the design of the project. The ordinance that we work under, Ordinance 64689, says that any structure that is built in the public right-of-way or with public money needs to be reviewed by the Preservation Board. In this case, this is a privately constructed structure on public property that will become owned by the city, and the Preservation Board needs to advise the Board of Public Service of its position regarding the item. So I, as a director, am recommending enthusiastic support for this. I think it's a really exciting project. Preston Jackson is the sculptor from a competition for this site. He has a BFA from Southern Illinois University and an MFA from the University of Illinois. He is a professor emeritus in the sculpture department at the Art Institute of Chicago. He's been a visiting artist at Bradley University. Sort of the accolades for him just kind of go on and on and on. And I'm gonna, well, I'll take any questions. In the meantime, we'll see if there were supposed to be some more pictures here, and we'll see if we can figure out where they went. But I'll answer questions, and then maybe we can allow Judge David Mason and Preston Jackson himself to talk about the project.
Commissioners, do we have any questions? If so, signal wildly at the camera so I know to call on you. Okay, I see nobody waving wildly at the camera. Judge Mason, would you like to speak?
Yes, let me first thank you for the opportunity to come in front of you. As you may or may not be aware, some years ago, we found in some dusty old files at the bottom of the Globe Democrat building, these lawsuits. And basically what these lawsuits were slaves who were suing their slave masters for their freedom. Under the Missouri Compromise, a law was in place here in the state of Missouri that essentially said, once free, always free. And what that law meant was that if a slave owner took their slave into a free state and stayed in that state for a length of time long enough to make the basic residence requirement, that slave then became free. Once that slave was free, always free. So when these slave owners would bring their slaves back to Missouri, they really were keeping them in servitude illegally. Now, obviously, being able to sue was difficult for these slaves. Not everyone was able to. Roughly 300 people, 300 or so slaves filed their lawsuits over a 57-year period. Now, what's unique, of course, is that St. Louis was at the epicenter of the conflict of slavery and abolitionism right here in our city. We had people here who were strong abolitionists, people here who were slave owners. And these types of lawsuits, you find a few here and there in other cities, especially Washington, D.C., but for the most part, nobody was entertaining them to the same degree that our courts were. You see there you saw there sort of a mock-up, or what's called a maquette of the memorial. Basically, what these slaves were facing is, number one, they had to find a lawyer who was willing to take their case to court. Somebody who was strong enough, secure enough in their profession to do so. Also, a lawyer who was skilled enough to convince a jury of 12 white males, all property owners, to issue verdicts against the white male slave owner who was being sued. So you can see, just by definition, that's a bit of an uphill battle. What these slaves were facing if they lost was anything from, I suspect, horrendous beatings were the light side of it, all the way to simply being sold down to plantations in Louisiana and Mississippi. And the reason that was such a horrible thing to happen is that those two states had a history of outright viciousness in terms of how slaves were treated. And if you ever take the history tour in New Orleans, you'll hear these horrible stories of how slaves were treated. And punishment would be being sold down the river to one of those plantations. In fact, that's where the phrase being sold down the river came from. Basically, these slaves were told, don't do anything to upset master, you'll be sold down the river. So it took to say that it took bravery is an understatement to file these lawsuits. Roughly half of the slaves won. Many of whom, once they won their freedom, they stayed in the St. Louis area, some left. But all of that remained essentially really historically unknown for all practical purposes. In fact, in law school, and I don't know if anybody else in the commission is a lawyer, the Dred Scott case was sort of studied as like a one-off. Like, you know, somebody filed this interesting, unique lawsuit to win the freedom of Dred and Harriet Scott, won at the trial level, and then were ultimately knocked out both between the Missouri and the U.S. Supreme Court. If you have never read the Dred Scott decision, one, I recommend you read it. Two, be prepared to think of it as a horror story, because the Supreme Court wrote into law every horrible thing you have ever heard, every bad rumor, every twisted logic, everything you could ever have heard to justify the conclusion that the, quote, Negro had no rights that the white man was bound to respect. And when Justice Taney said no rights, he meant no rights. You know, no property, no self-preservation rights, no nothing. What Abraham Lincoln saw in this was his fear that what the Supreme Court was trying to do was to give slavery constitutional protection, because the slaves are reduced to plain old property, and they're reduced to property in all 50 states, or that wasn't 50 at the time, I'm sorry, but of all states then in the Union, then what you're going to end up doing is ultimately constitutionalizing the right to own a slave, much the same way that the right to own a gun is constitutionalized. To put it bluntly, when the decision came down, he said, I went to bed with Illinois being a free state, and I woke up with it being a slave state. That was going to be the impact, to try to use Supreme Court rulings to protect slavery and essentially end the debate as to whether new states would be slave or free or whatever, basically saying that anybody anywhere, New York, Illinois, it doesn't matter, could own slaves, and slaves nowhere could ever sue a white person for anything. The Dred Scott decision stripped us of our citizenship, and in so doing took the position that nobody black could go to court and sue for anything. The courts were not designed for the, quote, Negro. The opinion goes on and on about how this is the way it's supposed to be, that we are designated to be a servile people, that our whole point in life was to serve the white man and basically have no rights in relation thereto. And that's what the Dred Scott decision did. And the Dred Scott decision was picked because, obviously here in St. Louis, you had a courthouse that was open to slaves, and not just freed slaves or ex-slaves, but actual slaves. The courthouse door was open to them to come into court and sue their master for their freedom. These were essentially the first civil rights cases around. I mean, and the lawyers to handle them regularly were the nation's first civil rights lawyers. So this went on for 57 years until the Missouri Supreme Court got stacked enough and the US Supreme Court got stacked enough to not only try to put an end to it, but basically to try to use the court system to put an end to the slavery debate. That is when Abraham Lincoln began to say things like, you know, no nation can survive half slave, half free. That's when it became clear that this wasn't going to end unless there was war. And that's why these lawsuits are so pivotal. Once these files were discovered, even for a while, people didn't quite get the meaning. WashU began to archive them. Then a few people began to take a close look at what these lawsuits were really meaning historically. And I myself spent a lot of time looking at what newspapers were saying across the country and political leaders and how they were getting into the debate on slavery. And one of the stories began to realize that what was going on in St. Louis was, without a doubt, one of the principal triggers of the Civil War, and illustrated the reason why basically either the southern states were going to give in or there was going to have to be war. Because once you establish constitutional protection for slavery, nothing else, I mean, that's it. You either change the US Constitution, and of course, Justice Taney knew that there was no way that you could get enough states to change the Constitution, bringing in the slavery, or we as a nation would just live with it. Well, obviously, the very powerful abolitionist movement wasn't going to live with it, nor were the northern free states. Consequently, as you know, the history then, the Confederate States of America were formed, they fired on Appomattox, and the rest, as they say, is history. The thing about this memorial is that it memorializes, most importantly, the courageous men and women who went to court to sue for their freedom, especially the women. Even though at that time, men such as Dred Scott were sort of given a prominence in these matters, there was women such as Harriet Scott who went to court or pushed these cases because if a woman was awarded her freedom, her children were free as well. And women would prompt their husbands, if there were one, or try to find ways to get to court to sue for their freedom when they had the basis for it, not only for themselves, but for their children. And so it was very, very important to try to win these lawsuits. And as I said before, they did so at the great risk of serious peril. So strong was the peril, in fact, that a number of the judges, in order to protect the slaves while the lawsuits were pending, literally issued orders against slave owners prohibiting them from hitting or hurting the slave until the lawsuit was done. Of course, you'd imagine a slave owner who was restrained from hitting their slave while the lawsuit was pending. If the slave lost, I don't think I have to go into the details of the horror after that. So that's what they were facing. And even these judges who took these positions were pretty courageous because they knew that a huge portion of the population of the city was pro-slavery, and there was always a risk of blowback. Likewise for the lawyers. So that's what was going on in our city. Our city was quietly a gateway to freedom as much as it was a gateway to Western exploration. So it became clear to the 22nd Circuit that this needed to be honored. This needed to be memorialized, that this was a very special aspect of the history of our city, an aspect of our city's history that, quite frankly, we'd all be very, very proud of. So they voted unanimously to erect a memorial. It was my job to basically, I guess you could say, start out leading the charge. And, that charge has been going on for a number of years. We formed a very good steering committee about 3 years ago of bar leaders, former president of Missouri Bar, Mound City Bar, Bar Association Metropolitan St. Louis, very prominent leaders of the legal community. We came together, we did a nationwide search for an artist, and then that brings us to Preston Jackson, who basically wowed us. And at this point, I want to turn it over to Mr. Jackson to give you some insight as to his vision as an artist on this particular outstanding work that he's proceeding on.
Thank you, Judge. Mr. Jackson?
Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay, I've been unmuted, right? Okay, can you hear me, everyone?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I think we better, I will ask or answer questions. That's more important now. I'm pretty much into constructing the armature for this, and we're looking at a very tall piece, but I'm stressing an interesting shape in itself, which suggests a little bit of modern art, more geometric shapes, and that's because of the surrounding area. A lot of deco art, it's a beautiful site. There's a lot of interesting architecture. But anyway, getting back, the main subject is that, like Judge said, we definitely want to reveal this history and make it somewhat, I don't want to say palatable, something that's easy on the eye. So I combine abstract architecture with a realism. So the realism is easily understood. You know, there are shapes that support and suggest conversations, especially the gestures that you will see in the figures. Another important aspect is that it's going to reveal a lot of the type of activity that took place in that area. And you don't want to overdo this. It's not about a lot of sympathy or stuff like that. It's about facts, and that's what I have to go upon. Any questions?
Commissioners, questions?
First of all, it's a stunning piece. It's very moving and all the things that you said about it. My question is about the maquette. How tall is it compared to what the finished piece will be? It's about 5 or 6. Or
1/5 of the size of the real room.
Oh, well, let's see. I'm 5'7", and it would come up to my belt line. Now, we're talking about the maquette.
the
Right.
maquette, correct. Mhm.
Yeah. That was very necessary. I have something to work off of, and we could use it, for whatever use, that's necessary. But it's about 3 feet, three and a half feet, something like that.
And the finished piece is going to be, I read it before, I can't remember now. How tall is the finished piece?
It's between 14 and 15 feet.
That's what I thought. Thank you. It's going to be magnificent.
And that's not including the base. See,
Right.
So the base will bring it up to another almost 20 feet.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, this is an aside. Dred Scott is buried, of course, in our Calvary Cemetery here in St. Louis. And taking a group of people through some years ago, I was amazed that at the top of the tombstone was covered with pennies. And I said, pennies? They said, of course, Abraham Lincoln, duh. It's kind of cute. It's kind of cute.
Wow, that's interesting to know. I have to visit that for sure.
The very first thing that Lincoln and the abolitionists did after the Civil War was immediately seek a constitutional amendment undoing what the Dred Scott decision had, because obviously the Dred Scott decision, being a U.S. Supreme Court decision, was still the law of the land after the Civil War. So the first thing that had to occur was undoing that. And since, of course, the Confederate States had lost, it then became easier to get the number of states necessary to change the Constitution to establish absolutely the right to citizenship and the civil equality of, all people. What was then called the Negroes, now the African American, but established the citizenship of everyone. That's also why it became necessary to take the position that if you were born in the United States, you were a citizen. That necessarily then incorporated all the slaves that, as you know, had essentially been here by that time almost 400 years.
I didn't know that. Thank you.
Wow. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Hamilton, would you like to make a motion?
You say me?
Yes. Would you like to?
Okay. Yeah. I motion that the Preservation Board recommend approval for the installation of the Freedom Suit Memorial sculpture.
Who wants the second?
I'll second. Vines.
Okay, a motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion, commissioners? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to call a roll. Commissioner Fathman, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Killeen, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Vines, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Alderman Coder, do you vote yes or no?
Aye. Yes.
Okay, I'm going to break from my usual precedent. I will also cast a yes vote for this one. Thank you very much, commissioners.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
And thank all of you. There, you look for your invitations for the unveiling. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. If I could, Mr. Chairman, just because we had some technical difficulties, I did want to show this one last slide, which is a completed work by Preston Jackson in Decatur, Illinois, that I really think shows just the quality of his work, particularly in metals. And I just think that I just wanted the board to see a completed work before we move to another item.
Mm-hmm.
It is awesome.
And it's called From Cotton Field to Battlefield in Decatur, Illinois.
And if any, I'm going to sign out now, but just if anybody on the commission of the board, would just like to just talk to me as a citizen, or you might have some interest from a historical point of view. I'm talk to all kinds of groups, all types of folks. I'm yours if you need to know anything.
Okay.
So again, I'm going to sign off for the dinner, and I know you guys have a lot of wonderful issues you need to discuss.
I already have a place for you to talk. All right.
I'm in. All right, I'm in. I'll talk to you soon then, Ms. Sattler. Take care now. Bye-bye, y'all.
And thank you. Thank you all.
Okay, commissioners, we will reconstitute now and hear appeals of denials. We have maintained our quorum, so I believe we are ready to hear the first appeal, which is 1432A Dolman. I would like staff to promise to tell the truth, everyone who testifies to promise to tell the truth, and anyone who testifies to message staff your address.
All right, I'm
Okay.
Andre Gagan with the Cultural
Let's
Research
begin.
Office, and I swear to tell the truth. This is 1432A Dolma Street. We also have C is also 1434A Dolma Street. I have two separate presentations, but the basic information is the same in both of them. I want to enter into the record ordinance 64689 amended by 64925, and the Lafayette Square Historic District Ordinance 69112, as well as the PowerPoint and the agenda item and the application. So this is an application to replace windows at 1432 to 34 Dolma Street. This is just, it is in this row of buildings along Dolman Street that are all condos at this time. This kind of shows where the windows are on 1432. It actually also, for some reason, the picture got cut off, includes the dormer window above that. These are the existing windows at 1432 Dolman. The applicant proposes to place 3 windows on the front facade, and the windows would include 2 on the second story and 1 on a dormer. And there then at 1434, there's also the same thing. The proposed windows will be sash replacements. We do not meet the historic district standards because there are jam liners which are visible on the exterior and are prohibited under the standards. Although the current windows are also sash replacements, there is no record of a permit for their installation. The application was denied and the applicant has appealed. This is a close-up of the visible jam liners. It's a little difficult to tell because it's all painted the same color. And I think they actually at some point painted part of the jam liner. And that's not really very for me to point to what that is. But if you see the line that kind of runs up close to the colored sash, that's part of the jam liner, and the right in front of that that area is also. Let's see. And this is just a window across Dolman, which is an original window, which obviously does not have a jam liner in it. You kind of see the difference between the two. And this is just some context on either side of Dolman. These are part of that condo, row of condos. And these are some context across Dolman Street. And this, I'll just go ahead and do 1434 also. Go down. Most of the pictures are the same, so you can kind of scroll through. These are the other 3 windows that are being replaced, those 2 and the dormer above. And again, just showing the sash replacements and the current sash replacements and the jam liners. Okay. The windows would replace, or you proposed sash replacements would replace existing sash replacement windows. They would use a jam liner, which is prohibited under the Lafayette Square Historic District standards. Unlike integral jam liners, the jam liners on sash replacements have a higher visibility. The Cultural Resources Office recommends that the preservation hold the director's denial of the windows that do not comply with Lafayette Square Historic District standards. And I do have a letter from the Lafayette Square Restoration Committee, Development Committee, from Suzanne Sessions, which she states that the purpose of this letter to inform the Preservation Board and the Cultural Resources Office that the Lafayette Square Development Committee does not support this appeal. And under that, she does include replacement jam liners visible from the exterior violate the standards. Do you have any questions?
This is Harrison Winter, and I'm with Masonry and Glass Systems. We're the contractor that had.
Wait, stop. Mr. Winter, I will call on you at the right moment. Okay, commissioners, any questions for staff?
Yeah, Chairman, it's Jack. I've got one. How many units are in this? Andrea, do you know how many units are in this row of condos?
I am not positive. I think in this building in particular, there's 4 units. But there are several buildings, but I don't know how many for sure in each.
So, but in the adjacent buildings that maybe are not part of 1432 necessarily, do they have the same window?
Yes,
do they have compliant windows, or are they all not?
No, I believe they all have sash replacements currently, as much as I could tell.
Okay. Thank you. Nothing further.
Any other questions from commissioners? Okay, I have a question for Barb Burkett. Yes, you. Barb?
Yes.
So we have 2 matters before us, 1 presentation. How do we proceed to build our record?
I think you need to address item B, and then if you want to, when you approach item C, you can ask the speakers if they would say substantially the same thing as their position, or if there's anything they'd like to add.
Okay, that helps. Thank you. Who is the appellant for agenda item B, 1432A Dolman?
Harrison Winter.
Okay, Mr. Winter, let's hear your case.
Okay, so our concern is
Before you begin, for the record, would you tell us your name?
Harrison Winter.
And is your testimony going to be the truth?
Yes, sir.
Okay, proceed, please.
Okay, so the concern of mine and the property owners is the fact that that whole row of housing is identical. I understand there was no record of a permit for all these sash kits, but at some point they must have all been done at the same time. So these existing sashes are starting to rot out and fall apart. to the point where the glass is almost falling out of some of them. So if we do a full tear out on here, which is the only other alternative, that means we're gonna have to replace all that original brick mold with new and do a full frame window here, which still will have a jam liner inside of it. And it's going to look different than all the adjacent buildings that are connected in that whole row of condos now. I feel like we're going back with it, what's the existing condition, and we're not changing it. I don't know where the board stands on that. I guess that's a question I would like to ask. Since we're replacing existing condition with the same, does that make a difference for this appeal and the fact that we're keeping the same visible appearance as all the adjacent buildings along that row of houses?
I suspect, Mr. Winter, that we will develop that thought in our discussion. Is there anything else you'd like to present?
I mean, the only other option, although I don't know if this would even work, we'd have to reconsider this, is just doing a sash repair, but we would literally have to replace those sashes with new. In that case, the existing jam liner is still there. So I don't know what the point would be if we're gonna save the existing and just do a repair, why we wouldn't be able to just to replace the parts with the same parts that are new, so that it's all one new functioning unit in there. And we're still saving that original brick mold. Those jam liners, as you can see in the pictures, they're not that visible, especially if you keep them the same color as the existing brick mold, or if you possibly just paint that outside edge to hide that jam liner a little bit. There may be some ways to disguise it better, but that's, I guess, for up to debate with the board. So that concludes my statement so far.
Commissioners, are there any questions for the appellant? Thank you very much. Who else has signed up to speak on this matter?
I signed up for 1432A, which is also part of this discussion. And my name is Marie Lopez. I'm the owner of 1432A. I'm sorry.
It actually is the matter under discussion at the moment, so your timing is perfect.
Okay, thank you. So there are actually 24 units in that building. So there is considerable work if you're requiring that all of us change our windows in the near future. And again, I'd like to reiterate, it's basically replacing what we've already had. Regarding the idea of not having it permitted, I suspect what had occurred is when this building was being redeveloped, that time all the windows were placed. So I don't see that there was perhaps a special permit for it. And excuse me if I'm speaking out of, I don't exactly understand everything as far as being able to have something like this permitted. However, you know, there was never an issue before, and they were never replaced. So again, I assume this is what was placed initially. So again, we're not changing anything. We're just putting back what was already there. I understand the historic committee and their desire to continue with developing the area and keeping the historic preservation. But again, we're not detracting, we're not taking back. What we're doing is just applying what was already placed initially. Moving forward, you know, with requiring us to replace all these windows, again, I'd like to reiterate, you're going to destroy some of the historic decor and having different bricks in order to have the windows, you know, in another fashion. So, you know, what is the point of having something replaced with what exists and detracting from the historic value that the building offers because of, you know, this code? I do realize moving forward, it would be nice that new windows would be placed in new buildings with these historic codes, but being that this is not, the windows are not going to match the rest of the building, the other 20 apartments, or condos. It just seems against what the historic codes are really truly striving for. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I did forget to ask you, was your testimony the truth?
Yes.
Great, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Is there anybody else signed up to speak?
Can I make one more comment on that?
Yes, Mr. Winter.
So kind of to reiterate what Marie was saying, is we're preserving the original brick mold. We're not going to change the shapes of these windows. They're going to be custom made to fit within that same eyebrow arch top that's there now. But we're not having to remove that existing historic brick mold and put brand new material in then. So we are still preserving the historic character of that window. Understand that, you know, the jam liner is the main issue. It is going to, you know, fit back into that pocket a little bit. So it is somewhat, you know, it is hidden a little bit. I mean, I don't know how familiar everybody is with the construction of these, but even if you do a full replacement window that complies, the new, even historically correct full frame windows have a jam liner in them inside the pocket of that full frame window. I don't believe the difference is going to be very noticeable from one to the other, except now it's going to be brand new brick mold instead of the original historic brick mold that's there now. I mean, we can replicate it, but it's still going to be brand new. And then, as Maria had noted, it's not going to match the other 24 units that are all connected in that row of housing there. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, commissioners, that concludes the testimony in this matter. Commissioner Killeen,
Yes.
do you have a motion?
I move that the Preservation Board uphold the director's denial of these windows as they do not meet the historic standards.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Alderman Coder.
Thank you. Commissioners, we have a motion on 1432A Dolman. Is there any discussion? Okay, commissioners, hearing no discussion, I'm going to call a roll. Alderman Coder, do you vote yes or no?
Yeah. Yes.
Commissioner Vines, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Killeen, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Fathman, do you vote yes or no?
No.
There are 4 yes. I abstain from the vote. There are 4 yeses, 1 no. The motion carries. Calling agenda item 1434A Dolman.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to need to exit the meeting at this time. Do you still have a quorum after I go?
I do.
Okay. Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Commissioner.
All right. All the best, Adana. Thanks for everything.
Okay, I need staff to return to the podium.
Thank you, Randy. I know you left.
I'm here. I'm here. Andrea Gagan is still sorry. Still swear to tell the truth.
Is the testimony substantially the same?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
You want me to enter the information again?
I believe that you entered it for both the first time.
Okay.
If you'd like to be sure, go ahead and do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I'd like to enter into the record ordinance 64689 as amended by 64925 and the Lafayette Square Historic District Ordinance 69112, as well as a letter from the neighborhood, the agenda item, the application, and the PowerPoint.
Great, thank you very much. Who's here to speak on this matter? Who's the appellant? Sir, is your testimony going to be substantially the same?
Yes, sir.
Who else is here to speak on the matter?
I only had Harrison Winter and Marie Lopez down.
Ms. Lopez, are you still here?
It doesn't look like it.
Okay. Commissioner Killeen, have you got a motion?
I move that the Preservation Board uphold the director's denial as these window replacements do not meet the historic code.
Is there a second?
Second. Coder.
Motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, Chairman, briefly, Alderman Coder. You know, I just want to say, I don't know if Ms. Lopez is still on. I know Mr. Winter is. And, you know, I'm sorry. I know this is probably not the determination that they liked, but, you know, representing this area, you know, historic windows and the added costs, I know is a bit of a burden, but, you know, if we start giving exceptions like this, then all of a sudden we're going to create a precedent where everyone's going to want them, and we're trying to uphold these standards as difficult as they can be at times. So I'm sorry for the outcome here, but you know, this is consistent with, I think, the board's past rulings.
Is there any further discussion?
Well, I'd like to say that I was taken with the fact that there were all these other units that were done at the same time. Then I guess they did the rehab, and these would look so different from all the rest already there. Because I believe in upholding the standards. Really, usually I do. This seems to be a slightly different case with all the other ones that were done that are identical. So.
Any further comments? Great, thank you. Commissioners, I'm going to call a roll. Commissioner Fathman, do you vote yes or no?
No.
Commissioner Hamilton, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Killeen, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Alderman Coder, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
And I abstain. Commissioners, that's 3 yeses, 1 no. The appeal is denied. Thank you very much. Calling agenda item D, 4701 McPherson.
Bethany Moore, Cultural Resources Office. I swear to tell the truth.
Proceed.
I would like to read into the record Ordinance 64689, the enabling ordinance as amended by 64925. Ordinance 56768, the CWE standards. This PowerPoint, the agenda, the presentation, the email that was sent to all of the board members, as well as a letter from the Central West End Planning and Development Committee, which I will read at the end. All right. This is 4701 to 03 McPherson Avenue. It is an appeal of the director's denial. It's in the Central West End. Here's the front of the building. And as you can see here, it is on a corner. So it sits, the front faces McPherson Avenue, and then Walton Avenue is to its side. Excuse me, hold on, there we go. So all of this is visible from the street. So this is the existing, they currently have a second floor deck that is for residential use for the apartments on the second floor. This is what it looks like. This project was approved by a board decision in 2008 under different standards, not the current Central West End standards that we have today. And the project is proposed to replace this deck, this existing deck, with new to be exactly the same as what is there existing. And as you can see, here's the deck site plan. So it's on this addition right here. This part right here is an addition, so it'll be over that. And here's the stairs and the deck. I'm not sure if you can see my arrow. Can you see my arrow moving on the screen?
Yes.
Yes, okay, all right, good. So again, this is the street. This is a parking lot area back here. So all of this is visible. It's an elevated deck, not a ground level deck. And then here are some details of the deck, the railing and the stairs. And this part, this blank space right here would be the addition that it sits on top of. And again, here are just some details. We had asked for the Soulard handrail since it is visible from the street. But the standards do say that where visible from the street, design and construction shall be compatible with the building to which it is appended, and the deck shall be constructed of finished materials, be of a shape and scale similar to that of an historic porch or patio, and be partially screened with landscaping or opaque fencing to limit visibility. And as you can see from the other pictures, as this is a raised deck and there's a parking lot right here, there's no way to screen it. So I did say that it partially complies because the deck is constructed above a one-story addition at the rear of this two-story building, but it is clearly visible from Walton Avenue. The design of the deck is not compatible with the building to which it is appended, nor does it follow any historic porch design. And due to the use of the rear as a parking lot and the height of the deck, screening it with landscape or opaque fencing to limit visibility is not possible. So based on those preliminary findings, the Cultural Resources Office does recommend that the Preservation Board uphold the director's denial of the application to replace the rear deck as it does not comply with the Central West End Historic District standards. And then I'd like to read the letter. So this is a letter that we were sent from the Central West End Planning and Development Committee. The Planning and Development Committee has reviewed plans for this proposed replacement of an existing deck at the rear of the subject property. Subject to our understanding that the existing structure was approved by the Preservation Board in 2008, that the proposed replacement will replicate the existing conditions, and the observation that there is limited visibility of the deck from the primary elevation of the building, the committee does not object to the granting of this appeal. Are there any questions for me?
Are there any questions? Okay, hearing none. I would note for the record that Commissioner Robinson has joined us and has heard this agenda item. Okay, let's hear from the appellant.
So the appellant is Alex Perrick, and he is here.
Okay.
Hey there. My name is Alex. I'm appearing before you for the 4701 McPherson Avenue. We're basically designers and the contractors for this project. Basically, we kept the same size, location.
Let me interrupt you just for 1 second. Is your testimony going to be the truth, sir?
Yes.
I'm sorry, proceed.
Yeah, we kept the same size and location of the deck, and we tried to follow the guidelines that we received from Bethany. And we used pyramidal caps on above each column, each post and column. And also we used round-shaped top rails, but we modified a little bit, you know, because we, in the same time, because we wanted to preserve the appearance of the old decks, we had to actually comply also with the modern building codes that require certain strength on the guardrails and the handrails. And the only difference that we did with this deck, actually, it's with the entry stairs. If you see the photo, right now we have a first flight that goes perpendicular to the one-story addition and then goes parallel. The new stairs will be parallel in total with that addition. That will, you know, clear make actually the space behind the deck more clear. And basically that's, and yes, the wood that we use will be yellow pine that will be treated, and it will be stained in some dark color. Actually, well some brown nuance or something like that. And also we use one more thing, and I'm done. Also, we'll put bollard pipes. Those are like steel pipes that will protect, because the back of that lot is used as a parking lot, and in order to protect the columns and the post of the new stairs. We'll use the pipe bollards just to protect it from the vehicle impact. And that's basically it, nothing spectacular.
Okay, are there any questions, commissioners? Okay, thank you very much. Is there anybody else here to testify on this matter? Okay, hearing none. Commissioner Fathman, have you got a motion?
Well, I propose or make move that we uphold the director's denial because the does not, pardon me, comply with the Central West End Historic District standards.
Thank you. Next time I'll warn you when I'm going to call on you.
That's okay. I couldn't find my notes.
So I don't startle you. Is there a second?
Did that include everything that we need in the motion?
I believe it does. Is there a second?
Second.
Who made that noise?
Tiffany?
Thank you, Tiffany. Is there discussion?
Yeah, sorry, Chairman, it's Jack. Did the code committee from the neighborhood recommend didn't they recommend overturning the denial? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, they are not opposed.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to be voting against this motion and voting with the neighbors in support of overturning the denial. I would like to overturn the denial.
Okay, we'll untangle that vote when we get to it. Who made the noise just now?
I did, Mr. Chairman, Mike Killeen. I'm right there with Jack. If we've got the neighborhood willing to have this same deck go up again, who are we to stand in the way? They wrote their own code over there.
We're the preservation board, unless that question was rhetorical. Any further questions? Any further comments? Okay, hearing none. There is a motion on the floor that's been made and seconded. I'll call a roll. If I can find it. Oh, there it is. Commissioner Robinson, do you vote yes or no?
No.
Commissioner Coder, do you vote yes or no?
No.
Commissioner Killeen, do you vote yes or no?
No.
Commissioner Hamilton, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Fathman, do you vote yes or no?
No.
That is 4 no's, 1 yes. The motion fails. Commissioner Fathman, did you vote against your own motion?
I did.
Okay. I just
Is that okay?
wanted to make sure there wasn't some sort of an audio glitch. Would you like to make another motion?
No, I agree with everybody else.
So do you have another motion?
You mean I couldn't vote against my own motion?
Oh, you can, but
You can.
your motion failed. I'm giving you a second shot at making a different motion.
No, that's okay. I'll stand with this. I live in this neighborhood and I think it's great. It's not gonna alter anything. I think it's.
So far, nothing's gonna happen if somebody does not make a motion.
Chairman, I'll make a motion if you'd like.
Okay, thank you, Dan, Jack.
Go ahead.
Am I recognized?
You are recognized.
Okay. I move that we overturn the director's denial of the application to replace the rear deck.
I'll second that.
4701 McPherson.
Oh, no, Commissioner Fathman, we're not letting you second anything. Does a real commissioner want to second this motion?
Oh.
Okay, we'll take Commissioner Fathman's second. Is there discussion? Okay. Commissioner Fathman, think carefully. Do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Hamilton, do you vote yes or no?
Sure, yes.
Do you vote yes or no?
Yes. Oh.
I'm sorry, did you say yes or no?
Me?
Commissioner
Yes.
Killeen?
Killeen is yes.
Okay. Commissioner Robinson, yes or no?
Yes.
Alderman Coder, yes or no?
Yes.
That is 5 yeses, no, no. The chair abstains. The appeal is upheld. The ruling is overturned. Commissioners, at this time, we'd like to take a 10-minute break. I would remind you to mute your audio and turn off your video. We'll be back in 10 minutes. Melanie, remember when I told you you have to turn your video off?
Well, I'm afraid if I push any button, I'll be off of the system. I just won't open my mouth. Is that okay?
It's fine.
I'm scared that I'll be kicked off.
Melanie, I can try to go ahead and mute you from here. It won't affect your screen at all.
I'm sorry, what's?
I could go ahead and mute you from here. It won't affect your screen at all.
Oh, okay.
Let's start rounding up commissioners. I noticed 2 Melanie Fathman icons here. You're only going to get to vote once, Melanie. I cannot read your lips. You have to unmute yourself. Nope, still not.
Dan, you need to unmute her.
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay, it's because I have an old-fashioned desktop, so the only way I can hear you and talk to you is on my telephone. So I'm the green one up there is I think the desktop icon, but what you're seeing now is the picture from my telephone. Does that make sense?
That's very sexy, Melanie.
Okay.
Also, 2 squirrels arrived with your votes on them. So
okay.
I'm pretty sure you're using all available platforms.
Okay. I can make the motion on the Menard House if you want me to, because I've got that in front of me, okay? I'm sorry I screwed up before.
You were fine. Okay, are all commissioners back? Great.
Coder here.
Back.
Yeah, looks like everybody is back. I'm going to call a roll to make Barb happy. Commissioner Batman, are you here?
I'm here.
Commissioner Hamilton, are you here?
Here.
Commissioner Killeen, are you here?
Present.
Commissioner Robinson, are you here? Aha. Alderman Coder, are you here?
Yeah, that's better.
Let's see if it works.
Okay, I am here. It still leaves us 5. We have a quorum. I'm going to call agenda item F, 5291 Lindell. Proceed.
Dan Krasnoff, I'm Cultural Resources Director, and I swear to tell the truth. Okay, we're good. Okay, this is an appeal of a denial at 5291 Lindell Boulevard in the Central West End Local Historic District. The applicant constructed a fence planter without a permit. Staff recommends, and has applied for a permit since, which has been denied. Staff recommend upholding the director's denial. And let's look at some pictures of it first.
Dan, you need to enter your ordinance.
I'm going to do that in just a second.
I'm sorry.
So this is a picture of the house. It is at the corner of Lindell and Union in the Central West End Historic District. And in the foreground there, you see the construction of the fence-ish structure with the posts and the wooden members. That is the subject of our review today. So what I'd like to do now, for Adana's admonition, is enter the following items into the record. The PowerPoint presentation I'm making now, certified copies of ordinances 64689 is modified by 64925, Central West Ordinance 64923, which delineates standards within the district. The application, the denial of the application, the appeal of the denial of the application, the document in defense of the applicant submitted by the applicant's attorney, and letters of opposition from Alderwoman Heather Navarro and from the West End Planning and Development Committee for the Central West End Association. So
I'd like to pause for just 1 second and voice the chairman's opinion that Adana was right, that you had forgotten to introduce that information and she caught it. I don't know what we're going to do without her in the future.
All right. Well, Adana is ever mindful, and we will have to double down on our own mindfulness. So the record will show that my notes clearly show the cadence in which I'm doing this presentation. Shall I continue, Mr. Chairman?
You may, but I do not change my mind.
That you're the boss, so that's cool. Okay. there are a number of issues that we're dealing with this application. So I'd like to go through those and explain the director's reasons for the director's denial and the staff recommendation today. So in the item submitted by the applicant's attorney, there were a number of arguments made. One I'd like to start with is whether a permit is required in this case. Part 5, Section 39 of Ordinance 64689 says that no owner or other person shall construct, demolish, or alter any designated feature or exterior architectural feature with respect to any improvement situated within a historic district or within or part of a landmark site, nor shall such person cause a permit for any such work to be performed upon such property unless an application shall have been filed with the building commissioner and a permit obtained thereunder from the building commissioner. Then there's some extra language about the building commissioner should forward that application when it is received, which the building commissioner did in this case. The construction in this case is work upon such a property as one in the district, and therefore a permit, in the director's opinion, is required. The ordinance also, just I'll parenthetically note, that says that if the Cultural Resources Office or Preservation Board denies one of these permits, the building commissioner is to deny it as well. So that's sort of the first point I wanted to make. The second is that this work is done in violation of the standards. The question was raised by the applicant in regards to the language of the ordinance and the direct prohibition against this construction. There is direct applicability. I would also state that the creation of these standards, well, I'll come back to that. So I'd like to point out the section on site work in section A on page 13 of the ordinance for walls, fences, and enclosures. That states that walls, fences, gates, and other enclosures form an important part of the overall streetscape. And later it says, opaque fences or walls are permitted only along alleys or enclosing the side or rear yard of the primary structure. No opaque fence shall be erected in the front of the primary structure on the lot. An exception to this prohibition may occur at corner properties on heavily traveled thoroughfares where a side yard fence set back 3 feet from the property line to create a landscape area with appropriate evergreen or deciduous planting would be acceptable. So clearly this is an opaque structure, not one that is evergreen or deciduous planting. Transparent fences and or evergreen or deciduous hedge may extend beyond the building line. So here we see the denial is based upon the fence qualities of the construction, its opaqueness in front of the building. The ordinance does not define a wall or a fence. In their submission, the applicant quotes Webster's dictionary because we don't have a definition of these in the ordinance. Definition 4 says something resembling a wall as an appearance, function, or effect, especially something that acts as a barrier or defense. This acts as a barrier. It functions in that way. No, it does not enclose the entire yard, but it still is a barrier. You can't walk straight through it. It blocks entry onto the yard where it is located. If there's any doubt about the applicability of the standards regarding the fence wall discussion, this work clearly violates the ordinance by disrupting the continuity of the streetscape. The standards say in paragraph 3 of the introduction, some block faces within the historic district exhibit a continuity of design with uniform building heights, setbacks, materials, window sizes, spacing, and this is the important phrase, landscape treatment. These elements help to create an unusually strong streetscape, which must receive special attention during the design review process. When new construction is proposed, consideration of the streetscape and compatible relationships between the new structures and existing ones are of utmost importance. So what I'd like to do now is show some more pictures. First, this is our site, as I said, at the corner of Lindell and Union. And let's go to the next one. And then there are just a couple more pictures here of the construction itself. And then, so that's looking, you know, to the east and the south. And let's go to the next one. This is the planting plan submitted by the applicant, which sort of demonstrates the height and the sort of use of the structure. I'll let them explain what the various symbols mean. And if we go to the next one. So here we have photos of the street. The bottom set of photos are the house in question. You can see the construction on the left-hand side. To the right of that, we are traveling east along the street towards Lake Avenue. And above that is a continuation of that streetscape closer to Lake, closer down to Lake Avenue, though not all the way. You can see there's virtually no construction of a structure in the front yard of these properties at the sidewalk that would constitute a construction of a historical type that is similar to what has been built by the applicant. If we could just go to the next slide, please. I also have shown some pictures of those front lawns in that area of that stretch of Lindell. And I think you can see here that, again, the basic urban design of these streetscapes is there's the roadway, of course, then there's a curb, then there's a sidewalk, and then there's a front yard. This condition is true all the way up from the corner of Lake to Union and turning at Union where this property is. To put this structure in its place is disruptive to the natural streets, not the natural, to the constructed streetscape over the last 130 years, and therefore is incongruous with the development of the street. I'll go to the next slide. And once again, we see a picture of the construction looking to the north and west. And if we go to the next slide. So there is one other photograph I'd like to show the board. And it's actually from the, well, actually, no, I'll go back to here. So there's one other element of this I want to show the board. And that is on the site plan here. I hope folks can see my cursor. So one argument the applicant will make is that there is a privacy fence on the house that is behind and at the corner from the house in question. So if this is the house in question, this is Westmoreland Place behind it. The standards do allow for privacy fences along Union Boulevard. And because it is the rear of the property adjacent. This parcel has really a small backyard and a very large front yard. And in the estimation of me as the director, construction of the fence along both the Union section and the Lindell section is basically in front of the property and constitutes building this opaque structure in front of the house. And then just to reiterate, so this is on the Lindell frontage. This is on the Union frontage. I will let the applicant say anything they want to about that. Another point I'd like to make is that when it comes to the streetscape, the ordinance is not a endless list of everything that the Board of Aldermen and mayor could think of when this was passed that one could put in their front yard. So for example, there's nothing that says you can't put a big jungle gym in your front yard in this ordinance. There's nothing that says you can't have a swimming pool, although there may be other parts of the city code that prevent that. But at the end of the day, that continuity language is designed to catch constructions of any kind that inhibit the progression of the historic character of the streetscape into the future. So in conclusion, I'd like to state that a permit's required The proposal weakens the design of the streetscape because of its incompatibility. It functions as a wall and a barrier, and it is in front of the building. And for those reasons, I hope the Preservation Board will uphold the director's denial and prevent this structure from continuing to exist on the lot. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Is there testimony from the community or from the alderwoman?
We have a letter from the alderwoman, but she is not present, I believe. She is in opposition to this.
She is actually present.
Oh, she is present.
So did she send you a communication?
She did.
Could you read it, please?
I can read the communication. The communication says, and I quote, "Good morning, Dan. I have reviewed the information from CRO staff and the comments from the CWE Planning and Development Committee, and I agree that this structure creates a barrier that acts as a wall along the property boundary, which is inconsistent with the streetscape and appears to violate the historic district standards. I hope that the property owner is able to find an alternative way to meet their goal while adhering to the standards, but I cannot support it at this time. Thank you, Heather B. Navarro, Alderwoman, 28th Ward."
Is there any other testimony that has been submitted to you?
There is.
Okay.
This is to the Preservation Board regarding 5291 Lindell Boulevard. Dear Chairman and members of the board, the purpose of this memorandum is to advise the board on the recommendations of the Planning and Development Committee of the Central West End Association regarding the two referenced matters which are to be considered at today's meeting. 5291 Lindell. The committee has considered the appellant's appeal from the director's denial of a permit application filed following the issuance of a stop work order to allow retention of a non-conforming structure constructed at the front property line without a permit. In addition to introducing an unprecedented, uncharacteristic, and graceless feature at a prominent location along an important thoroughfare in the CWE Historic District, the offending structure fails to satisfy several specific requirements of the Central West End Historic District standards. Accordingly, the committee recommends that the director's denial be upheld, the appeal be denied, and the applicant be ordered to remove the structure without delay. Thank you for your consideration, Jim Dwyer, comma, chair.
Is that it?
That is it.
Thank you so much. Is the appellant present?
Yes.
Who is the appellant?
The appellant who's present is David, well, the owner is here, but I believe David Weiss, his attorney, is going to represent him and give testimony today.
Okay, Mr. Weiss. You need to unmute yourself.
Mr. Weiss, you're muted. Oh.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Many times.
I was using my phone. All right.
Before you proceed, let's see if we can fix that audio. What's going on, staff?
Can you use?
Are you on two devices?
I am. I'm 314-341-4195. Can you unmute that?
Okay.
Is that better now?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Much better audio quality. Thank you.
Mr. Weiss, will your testimony be the truth?
And the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Excellent. Proceed.
All right. The purpose in constructing this garden, which is what it is, was to both allow a resident or soon-to-be resident of the property to get her fingers dirty in the soil because she's in a wheelchair and cannot bend over to get into the gardens without falling out of the chair. The ability to have a raised garden addresses that. The
the house sits so far back that, and it sits back, but there's little space for gardens. And this individual who's already handicapped would be denied the ability to enjoy her neighbors who might be walking along the street on the sidewalk. So there's an accommodation, a reasonable accommodation for a raised a garden bed. The second thing is, unbeknownst to the new owner of the property, there is a substantial amount of trash, some of which you don't want described in this or any other phone calls, that blow onto his lawn. The hope is that this will stop that from occurring and will allow a faster cleanup of the trash. It is a garden. It's a raised garden. It is as is permitted under the building code for arbors, trellises, and other minor structures. But it is a garden, and that's all it is. Dan, if you could go back to the photo that has the 12-inch, 22-inch structure, the drawing, the design drawing. Yeah, there it is. As you saw, the 12-inch butts are almost abut the sidewalk, and then there's two boards. They're 18 inches and then 24 inches deep, and they would be filled with soil and to allow annuals and perennials in that lower category. And then the pine is not exactly accurate. These are going to be small pines that are not going to grow tall. They are shrubs, if you will. And then there's the vine at the back is going to grow up on strings that will attach to those 4x4 posts that you saw in some of the pictures. And it's strict to be able to allow the strings to be attached and to prevent somebody from just coming down if they were just a dowel rod and either pulling it out or breaking it off. They're not going to be able to do that with a 4x4. The intent is to cover this entire structure, so it's 22 inches high, is to cover it with dirt on both sides. So it's basically a mound. It's basically a berm, and allows the plants to grow, allows the resident who's there part of the time, will be spending more time there, the ability to utilize this, as I said, get her fingernails dirty with the soil. There is, she's in a wheelchair. There's a wheelchair ramp. You can confirm that at the residence. So there is an individual that's handicapped, and we're asking that there be a reasonable accommodation made in this instance. It is also clear anything that, let's go to fence and walls. I provided the definition. I believe Dan Krasnoff, the director, said that it was acts as a barrier, perhaps not an enclosure. But anything acts as a barrier. And in fact, if you take a look at my photos that are submitted, and I'm going to them right now. If you go to,
quickly say, I apologize. I've labeled the first two photos photo 2. So the one that you see is actually your photo 1.
Okay, photo 2 not only has a fence as a barrier, and it's permitted, but we also have a substantial amount of foliage there, which acts as a barrier. If you look at photo 3, it's the same way. There is a substantial amount of foliage that blocks entry. That is also, I believe you could say, acts as a barrier. I'm not going to go through all the photos right now, but you'll see as I do go through them what I mean when this is a garden. It is a raised bed garden, but it's a garden just like these other photos that are shown. And in fact, the photos that Dan Krasnoff presented, they also show landscaping. And this is nothing different other than it's raised. And it doesn't go the entire front of the house. It's only a partial area, and it's intended to also limit the amount of debris that blows onto the lawn. I don't believe that there is an ability to prevent anybody from jumping over this fence, if you're calling it a fence, or jumping over this wall. So it's really not acting as either a fence or a wall because it's not a barrier. It doesn't create a rampart or any type of enclosure. As far as the continuity of design, let's look at the photos. Dan, could we go to photo one, my photo one? All right, photo one. No, photo number one.
I believe that is your photo number one, is it not?
It's labeled as photo two. Okay.
It is labeled,
perhaps it is.
but I
Okay, so
apologize,
photo
it is
one.
photo one.
We'll go with this. Okay, so this was appellant's photo, respondent's photo. As I said earlier, it not only has a fence, which is opaque. You can say, well, you can see through the slats, but if you go at a certain angle, it becomes opaque because they all line up equally. So it's also technically opaque, and it's got the vegetation. Dan, next photo, please. By the way, all of these are along the block from Union to Kings Highway. You can see that there's bushes on the corners of this property, and they're much taller than what is being proposed in the instance of this raised garden. Next photo. Here's another photo. It shows heavy, tall landscaping. It almost looks wild. I don't want to offend anybody if you live there or you have friends that live there, but it's almost out of control. Much like the first photo I went to, it is wild foliage. Next photo. Here's a house that has, again, it's got foliage, tall. I don't know if those are boxwoods or pines, but at the corner, and additional vegetation in back. It's again taller, but there's no continuity, house to house. Next photo, please. Here's the subject property. You can see that there's a John Deere piece of equipment. It's been there 3 times this year because of the 20-foot holes created by water main breaks. And it's also graced with a porta potty in their front yard. And this has, I travel that intersection often. There is a lot of water main breaks in that stretch of Lindell, and that piece of equipment perhaps stays there all the time. This is a park type parcel in front. In fact, the street that this house is abutting isn't Lindell, it's Park Road, technically, and Lindell is where the balustrades are. That's actually the sidewalk that's adjacent to Lindell. So there's a dead-end street to the left of the John Deere heavy equipment. It's a dead-end street that this house is on. Technically, it's not Lindell, but I'm not going to quibble today. But you can see there's small boxwoods that line the front walk up to the door, and you can begin to see the elevated or raised garden box between the porta potty and the shovel on the heavy equipment. Dan Krasnoff, next photo, please. There's another picture of the container garden, Those posts, again, are intended to have nothing more than strings or wires attached to allow the vines to grow. If that's the problem, my client will gladly cut those off at the 22-inch level, and we can figure out some other way to get the vines to grow up. All right, next photo, please. And the next photo is the property on Union, which abuts this property. So they've got an 8-foot opaque fence, and it's clearly opaque. Perhaps I'm hearing from Dan that this is permitted because it's on Union. Technically, part of this property is on Union, so perhaps we could somehow figure out a way to combine that and put that up, which I think would be a worse eyesore to have this type of a structure on the Lindell frontage. You're much better off, because it's not prohibited, to have a raised garden. There's no other raised gardens in the front of Lindell, but it doesn't mean it's not going to happen, because there are people with handicaps and they can't bend over and take care of the garden. The building code is quite clear, and in fact, the building commissioner said quite, in talking to the owner of the property, made it quite clear. Frank Oswald said, when told that there was a requirement to have a permit for a raised garden, his exact words were, "This is stupid." And I agree with that assessment. But
Come here, what I'm doing.
I don't make, huh?
Come here.
Pardon?
Come here. Yes.
Pardon me?
No, that wasn't for you. She was talking to someone else.
All right, sorry.
By the
So
way,
the building
if
code-
I had a nickel for every time Frank Oswald called something stupid, I'd have a lot of nickels.
I hope that's in the record. Okay. So he is the building commissioner, Hal. Love him or not, that's who we've got. So my point is, there's reason to have this raised garden. It permits a handicapped individual the ability to access a garden. It prevents or mitigates the amount of trash that blows. It is not unsightly. It'd be the same thing as if, because it will be covered with dirt, so it'll be a mound or a berm, which I believe is permitted. This merely allows the soil to stay in place and not slide down and have dirt all over the sidewalk. So it really is. Oh, and by the way, the front of this of the horizontal sidewalk facing boards will be painted or stained a dark green, so that it blends into the lawn, and the shrubbery and the vines and the flowers are all going to be basically look like it's just growing out of a berm, which is exactly what it's going to be. The wooden structure is merely to hold the soil in a position so it doesn't, fall or slide over in a heavy rain or excessive watering, if that should happen, if the irrigation system waters too long, so it doesn't slide, the dirt doesn't slide onto the sidewalk. I ask that my letter of July 27 and accompanying photos and ordinances be submitted into the record, and I'll take any questions.
Commissioners, do we have questions for the appellant?
I have a question. Has
Mr.
your
Kareem?
client considered any other space on her site that might, where she might be able to do landscaping that wouldn't be in the public way?
Could I defer to Dr. Gopri Pata, who's on this call, to answer that?
Yep.
Since I am under oath.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's a question for you.
Dr. Pata, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, will your testimony be the truth?
Yes,
Have you messaged your contact information to Adana?
I will do that immediately.
Thank you. Well, you can testify first. Proceed.
Okay. We did consider several other locations, but there really isn't much of a space that has sunlight that we can get adequate growth. The other areas would require us to get rid of trees that were rather large, and we felt that would it would diminish the appropriateness of it. There are some very large trees in the back of the property we're trying to maintain and enhance, so we didn't want to go there. And so we felt like this was a sun exposed space. It's a raised bed garden. And if the opposition is that it's so close to the sidewalk, we're more than happy to set it back an additional 3 feet or even 4 feet if that's what would make people happier. We were just trying to maintain the ability for a wheelchair to roll on an existing concrete structure. But to me, it's just a container garden. I didn't realize that there would be such a vociferous opposition to a garden.
Doctor, this is Commissioner Colleen who asked the original question. Yeah, I'm sorry you're running into this, but you bought a house in the historic district and one of the strongest ones, and they watch everything over there. So would you? It sounds like you'd be willing for a compromise. I mean, would you be willing to work with the neighborhood and cultural resources to see if an alternative compromise solution might be found?
Absolutely. All I'm trying to do is create a place for somebody to garden and in sunlight. And that's the issue. And the only place I could come up with it was in that area, but we're not opposed to anywhere really. It just happens to be that was a good place. And the other option, if the opposition is because it's wood, I would be happy to do it as a berm. I just don't want soil erosion to be an issue. Well, all I'm trying to do is create a place that we could do this at. I mean, if the opposition is that they don't want the second set of boards, then we would just do just the 8-inch, which is less than the 8x8 sitting in front of Union property adjacent to us. We're trying to make this. We also want to make this an amazing space. None of us want to detract from the look and the feel. And if you look at something when it's half done, of course it's not going to look great because all construction half done looks like crap. And this is a container garden, so I really didn't think we even needed a permit in the beginning because it was a container garden.
Commissioner Colleen, any further questions?
No, thank you so much, Doctor.
Thank you. I'll mute myself. Thank you.
Any other commissioners have questions? Okay, then. I believe that concludes the testimony in this matter.
Chairman, I have one question briefly.
Yes,
sorry for the delay there. I was unmuting myself. And I guess this is more probably for Councilor Weiss, who I've read his letter and appreciate his zealous advocacy. I know he quoted the definition of a wall. He's gone to great lengths to say that this is not a wall or a fence. And then the same token said that part of the purpose of this is to keep trash and debris off the property. So could he please comment on, I guess, the fourth prong of the definition of wall under the Merriam-Webster dictionary that he included in his letter, which is something resembling a wall, something that acts as a barrier or defense, because that seems to be what we have here.
Can I use by comparison? How about curb? Is a curb a wall? It's intended to act as, I guess, a barrier if you want to take the CRO's position. It shows a limit or a rampart for the roadway. It is intended to keep water from going onto the sidewalk, but it's a curb. No one calls a curb a wall. It's a curb. And that's what this is. It's basically, it's the same thing. It's not big enough to be a wall. You don't think of boards. In fact, there's a picture. There are pictures that I have attached. Let me go to my, instead of online, look at them, where there's railroad ties in front of their garden.
Is that photo 7? I think that's the photo I'm looking at.
Well, yeah, but it's also on Lindell. I believe photo number 2. You can't see it except in the bushes closest to in the foreground. I think there's railroad ties there. Oh, and also photo number 3 has railroad ties. It's overgrown, and those railroad ties are kind of old, but they are there. And I dare say there's probably there are other other homes that have railroad ties are bricks. Those are not walls. You can step over them. It's the same thing here. Now you can say one's taller than the other, but again, we can be philosophers and say, is a 3-legged dog a dog because all dogs have 4 legs? It is a situation where I don't believe the intent of the lexicon staff at Merriam-Webster was to say anything that has a vertical component constitutes a wall. It's not. And a gutter or a curb is a perfect example of that. Alderman, is that sufficient, or do you want more?
No, that's plenty. Thank you, Mr. Weiss.
Mr. Chairman, you're muted, so I don't know if you were hearing me or not.
Yes, Mr. Dwyer.
Thank you. I heard you just before that last exchange. It seemed apparent that you were about to go to the commissioners. I did register via a chat expressing my interest in testifying, and I would like that opportunity if that is possible.
It is, Mr. Dwyer. Proceed.
Oh, thank you. I will testify with integrity, and what I speak will be the truth. So I'm going to try to make this short. I think that I'm looking at the attorney's conclusions and the foundation for justifying the retention of what's there. And I just have to challenge the 3 matters. The first has to do with the subjectivity of the suggestion that what has been constructed is aesthetically pleasing. I can state with authority that there are those who would argue vociferously to the contrary, and I base that on the exchanges that occurred within the Planning and Development Committee as we considered this matter. The second point has to do with the suggestion that what has been constructed would reasonably accommodate the interests of an individual with disabilities, and that may well be, and that is a laudable objective, but it is also not a matter for this board to be adjudicating. It is a matter that if it were to be raised, if the issue were to be raised, would be appropriately disposed of through the screed of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and it's not an issue for determination in this forum. And I thought that the third point about the trash blowing onto the lawn was, yes, I suppose there is trash, but there is trash everywhere, and it isn't necessary or appropriate to build a non-conforming structure, which is what this is. It is a structure, non-conforming structure in a situation of this sort, especially given the prominence of the location and given the absolute prohibition on structures of any sort being constructed beyond the front property line of the principal structure on the property, and that is the case here. So thank you for the opportunity.
May I respond, Chairman?
No, sir. Is there anybody else who has signed up to testify? Excellent. I will then take a motion. Alderman Coder, have you got a motion?
Yes, Chairman, I move that we uphold the director's denial as the construction is incongruous with the streetscape and the criteria of the Central West End's historic standards.
Is there a second?
Second.
Who seconded?
Colleen.
Who seconded?
Anthony.
Thank you. Commissioners, is there any discussion? Hearing none. I'll call a roll.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to just say something really quickly. As I mentioned earlier, I think it's important that this owner work with staff and the neighborhood association to see if maybe a berm solution might be acceptable over there. I don't think this is an absolute no to the idea of what you want to do. It's just this particular aesthetic solution isn't quite what the standards had in mind. If the vote goes against it.
Anything else?
No, sir, sorry.
Thank you. Okay, commissioners, I am going to call a roll on a motion that's been made and seconded. Commissioner Fathman, do you vote yes or no?
Unmute.
Melanie, yes or no?
Yes, I'm sorry, yes.
Okay. Commissioner Hamilton, yes or no? I stepped on you. Did you say yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Killeen, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
And Alderman Coder, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
The chair abstains. There are 5 yeses, 1 abstention. The appeal is denied and the decision of the director is upheld. Thank you very much. Calling agenda item 2309, Menard.
Thank you.
Bethany Moore, Cultural Resources Office. I swear to tell the truth. I would like to read into the record Ordinance 64689, the enabling ordinance as amended by 64925, Ordinance 57078, which is the Soulard standards. This PowerPoint, the agenda, the presentation, as well as the email that was sent to you earlier. So this is 2309 Menard Street. It is an appeal of a denial, and it is in the Soulard Historic District. This is the front of the house. And this is the lot. So as you can see, the house fronts on Menard Street, but the lot is visible from Shenandoah Avenue and Menard Street. All right, and here is the proposal. The proposal is to build a retaining wall. And in here, here is Menard Street. Here is the front of the residence. And then this L right here is the proposed retaining wall. And as you can see, this is the streets. This is the open corner. There is no building here. And then this is some proposed landscaping. And this is the proposed material for the wall. It's a CMU concrete block material. And then this is the plan for the wall. So it'll be about 42 inches above at the height, and then it does stagger down. All right, and then here are some pictures that I took. So this is looking from Menard Street into the yard, and you can kind of see the outline of the foundation of the wall. They were stopped by a building inspector, so they applied for a permit, but because of that, you can see where the wall would be located. Again, this is at the corner of Menard and Shenandoah. You can kind of see it there. And this is just to show you from looking at Menard how much of the yard is visible, because this fence is not opaque. Again, just another picture. All right, so I'm gonna leave it here. So the standards for, the standards have outlined landscaping walls as well as retaining walls. And for landscaping walls, they have to meet the following. They cannot sit in front of a public facade. They have to be of a height of 48 inches or less, be constructed of red brick and have a limestone or precast concrete cap, or be constructed of stone. So the proposed project does not comply. Although the wall height is 48 inches or less, the concrete masonry unit material does not comply with this. And then for the retaining walls, the following new and reconstructed retaining walls have to be based on a model example, which is a historic wall in the area. Also, the following types of retaining walls are prohibited on public facades: railroad ties, landscape timbers, concrete block of any type, and exposed cast and placed or precast concrete. And as you can see, this wall does not comply with that because the proposed wall is not based on a model example, and the use of the concrete block as a material for the wall is prohibited. So based on those findings, the Cultural Resources Office recommends that the Preservation Board uphold the director's denial of a permit to construct a retaining wall, as the wall is not based upon a model example and the proposed material does not comply with the Soulard Local Historic District standards.
Great, thank you very much. Questions, commissioners? Did you introduce everything that needed to be introduced?
Yes, I did hear from the neighborhood. They did not submit a letter, but they did let us know that they're not in opposition.
Okay. Any other commissioners have questions? Thank you. Is the appellant present?
Yes.
Okay. Tell us your name.
My name is Brandon Hafer, and I swear to tell the truth.
Proceed then, sir. And thank you for your patience.
Oh, no problem. That's my luck usually. I'm always at the end. As you can see, I provided some photos. I wanted to preface this presentation, and for the sake of brevity, we can go through it pretty quickly. I didn't provide these to dox any of my neighbors. In fact, it was quite the opposite, but I needed to show that these walls were present in the neighborhood. One of which is on this slide right now, according to the individuals I've spoken to with the Soulard Restoration Group, the one they have an issue with is this one that is labeled near Molly's. This wall is directly in front of the home, and they had a very big issue with it because it blatantly disregards the rules. So according to them, this was an issue for them. We can go to the next slide. And again, these are just other walls in the neighborhood. You have one that is staggered here on 18th Street using the, by the way, these are identical blocks as to what I'm using, except mine are gray in color. This is a timber wall at Molly's. We can go to the next slide. So this is, well, the picture is horrible because I didn't want to go up to my neighbor's home and pull away his ivy. The wall here is in front of the home supporting the land, and it is the exact block that I am proposing to use. As you see, I have a note here. Something I'll get to later is the wall, while from a 30,000 foot view on paper, it does appear that it is extremely visible. After speaking with some people from the SRG, they understand that the wall is so deeply inset in my yard. It's a very large corner lot. In fact, you could fit 2 homes on the lot. Once the greenery is in place, the wall will all but disappear into the background. So I wanted to show this just as an example of how it will not be visible as well. We can go to the next slide. And these are just two other examples. The one on the left is just an alley. It's highly visible from the street. Again, these, I really could care less. Doesn't bother me. This is in the alley, and this is over at Big Daddy's. Doesn't bother me at all either, but the picture is taken far away, but the stones are very similar, and they're not stone. They're concrete in makeup. We can go to the next slide. If there is another slide, I cannot recall. And these are two other examples of identical style materials being used. The one on the left is down by near Russell and 12th, very close to McGurk's. And they use those same style blocks to create a wall to retain soil to allow entrance into their garage. And then the one on the right is just another home near 9th Street. And I believe there are more. In fact, when I spoke to one of my neighbors who is with the Soulard Restoration Group, he said there's actually a number more, and I can give you the addresses if you want. But again, my goal was not to build a huge dossier of photos of people that are doing things wrong. I just wanted to show an example, and I am very aware that the rules do change, will change. So once I received notification from the SRG that they were comfortable with my wall, I really wasn't too focused on going through these imagery, through the imagery provided. I'm not sure if there's any more images after this. I haven't looked in the presentation in a couple days, but. And these are just pictures of the lot, which I believe Bethany has already shown. The yard's in a bit of disarray right now because I was removing a bunch of concrete foundation that was there from who knows how long ago. So that's why that pile of dirt is in the yard, and the yard looks a little unkempt. So I believe that is the last image. I just wanted to take a minute to state a couple things. The project was not initiated for any superficial reason. In fact, there was a brick retaining wall there up until this spring. And after a couple very torrential downpours in late spring, a 6 to 7 foot section that met at the corner on the west side of the wall just collapsed. I came out in the morning and it fell clean off straight into the yard. So it kind of initiated the project for me regardless. So I pulled away the rest of the wall in order to complete this. The other side of the wall, the west wall, was in disarray as well. It was not collapsing, but the top 4 to 5 layers of brick, my kids could go up and just pick them up off the wall. So from my perspective, it was a matter of time before that failed as well. If not the top, the bottom of the wall would just blow out. Let's see here. I had a couple notes so I don't forget, and just to be fair with everybody's time.
You're fine, and you've been patient.
Let's see here. I had already mentioned that per my neighbor and understanding him and the letter that was sent from the SRG, they don't have any issue with it. So I feel that's an important point I wanted to make. I also wanted to comment that my wife and I love this neighborhood. We chose this neighborhood. The home that we purchased that this wall is near was basically a condemned home. We purchased it from a woman that was a hoarder, and we rebuilt it per the standards according to SRG in the historic district. So we do love this neighborhood, and our intent to kind of set the example, and we've always felt it's incumbent upon us to make sure we do things the right way. This wall was the only time I've ever kind of appealed and asked for forgiveness because, again, it is not a superficial wall. My goal is to have it disappear into the yard. If this was closer to the front, I would never even bother to bring this to an appeal because I really don't have a reason to do so. So that's really my case. I don't have anything else to say other than I feel like all my neighbors have been in support. They know me very well. The SRG does support the project. So I'm asking to please grant my appeal. So thank you so much for your time, by the way. I certainly appreciate it.
Are there any questions for the appellant?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yes, just to clarify, is the wall, sir, is it already built?
No. What I ended up doing was I have about 6 inches of base down right now, okay, and I had leveled everything out with one row of blocks. So I went ahead and put down a row of blocks, not even thinking about it until a inspector had come by and said, hey, by the way, you need to stop. So that initiated the stop point for me. Okay. But it is, there's one layer of blocks that are perfectly level at this moment.
Okay, and it looks like the south portion is up against the building, or is that right?
No, so the south portion is the smaller part of the wall right there, yeah. So that is actually, those are raised beds directly underneath Bethany's arrow there. That's all raised up. So there is a poured concrete wall directly behind the home that is, I really couldn't tell you the age of it. But that wall right there was supporting a tremendous amount of soil that we actually have raised planters on now.
Okay.
And that wall right there. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
We've got the longer section here. So what are the lengths of these two sections? You know offhand?
I can look real quick.
The shorter section is 14 feet long and the longer section is 37 feet long.
Okay, and your intended height on both of those again? I'm sorry to ask you to repeat all this.
Oh, no problem. At the highest, it is 44 inches tall in the corner, and then it drops down. So the smaller wall on the south side is 42, and it drops down about 1 stone. But as you can see on the west wall, it drops down to about 24 inches at the bottom. So it's almost an angle from top to bottom.
Okay, thank you so much, and thanks for bringing your house up to date. It really looks nice. I remember what it used to look like.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Further questions for the appellant? Okay, is there anybody else here to speak? Great.
He was the only one that signed up.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Killeen, do you want to make the motion?
I would like to make a motion if I could ask a question of Bethany before I do that.
Sure.
So Bethany, that indication from the neighborhood association, did you hear that yourself verbally that they're okay with this?
Yes, actually, I heard, so through email, Jay had told me that Jay Gibbs had told me that he took a poll and they polled to not send a letter and they're not opposed. And then I've also spoken to a few other people on the committee who have told me that they're not opposed.
And okay. Commissioner Killeen, Alderman Coder here, if I could chime in, I'm on those email threads with the plan review team, and I can attest to that yes, they are in fact not opposed to this project. In fact, nor am I. I'm supportive of what Brandon and his wife are doing here. I think it's great.
Okay, well, based on that input and just the fine job these folks have done with this property already, I move that the Preservation Board overturn the director's denial of this wall and allowed it to be built as constructed.
Second.
There's a motion that's made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'm going to call a roll. Commissioner Robinson, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Alderman Coder, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Killeen, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Fackman, do you vote yes or no? Melanie?
She's
Tell you what,
yes.
make a thumbs up if you're voting yes. Make a thumbs down if you're voting no. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Can't see your thumb. Put your thumb in front of the camera. Okay.
I can't unmute her. She has to do it.
Okay.
Is that it?
Say yes or no.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Melanie.
You're welcome.
The chair
I can't wait to get back to Market Avenue.
The chair abstains. The aye votes prevail. The appeal is upheld. And that concludes the business that I see on the agenda. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, without any objection, then this meeting stands adjourned. Thank you very much. Adana, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hooray.
Thanks, Adana. We'll miss you.
Bye, Donna. Thanks.
Donna.
Bye.
Okay. So are we done?
I think we're done. You have a little